Hello and welcome back to the Wheel Talk podcast. My name is Abby Mickey. With me today, Loren Rowney.
G'day everyone. Happy Olympics.
Gracie Alvin.
Hey. Olympic edition. Woo!
The first of two. Today we're going to talk about the Olympic time trial plus some other Olympics stuff that's popped up. Give a little preview to the road race. Just your general women's professional cycling chat. Very, very exciting stuff. And I'm really thrilled to be sitting here with two Aussies to talk about the Olympic time trial. We'll try to rein in all of our emotions, but I doubt that'll be successful. Where to start?
Well, do you want to start with what Gracie was just saying before, the opening ceremony, before we get to the really juicy, good stuff that Gracie and I are very excited about? We're all excited about.
I just wanted to touch on it because I really liked it. And I don't know if everyone liked it, but I thought it was awesome, actually. And maybe some older generations probably wouldn't have liked it as much, or conservative people. But I loved that they just really lent into French avant-garde, and there was a lot of really quirky stuff in there and so much diversity. And it was really awesome entertainment. I love that it wasn't in a stadium. They used the city so well. And I loved some of the routines. My favorite was the fashion one, and then I nearly burst into tears when the person with the disability did some break dancing, because all up until that point, the diversity was so beautiful and the costumes were so beautiful, and I feel like so many people were singing, and then to have someone doing something so extraordinary like that, I thought it was wonderful, and I thought that must have touched so many people around the world, and plenty of other points in there as well. So it's cool to the opening and closing ceremonies are also this great opportunity for the arts to have their moment in the games, and I just thought that the French nailed it. Especially it must have been super hard to have everything go so well in the way that they did it, because they probably wouldn't have done a proper full dress rehearsal when it wasn't in the stadium. So I think that it didn't look like there were many mistakes from the average Joe viewer like me. So kudos to the French organizers. I just thought it was awesome.
I didn't catch all of it, but I agree with Gracie. And what I liked about this as well, because it was on the same, it was open to the public. And this is the first time, I guess, you had, of course, the VIP sections, but the general public could actually attend this, which I guess has never happened before. Usually opening tickets are very expensive and hard to come by. So I thought that was a really nice touch, which meant that the public, the Parisians that are there, all the fans that are there to watch the various different sports, could participate in it. And there was a lot of commentary. I just skimmed over some stuff that I was seeing on the various social media channels of people not really understanding what they were seeing. A lot of people were offended because of links to, I think there was some confusion from certain religious groups. And I think that's where some of the offense was coming from. But I saw I'm trying to think who it was, a woman who was part of the organization basically explained exactly what was going on and the similarities between the Last Supper and the Greek. I can't think of the name. I don't know if you can do
it. Was Dionysus.
The painting, because a lot of the confusion was about the Last Supper versus the...
And people are just really quick to jump to criticize such things, but it was beautiful. It was a work of art. And the opening ceremony, if I think back, I still love the 2000 opening ceremony because it was in Australia, and there's so much reflection of Australian culture and just the country itself. And it is a chance for that country to showcase, who they are as people. So it was beautifully done in that respect.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I really loved the opening ceremonies. I feel like there were parts of it that I didn't quite understand, but also the part of the fun was looking into why that was depicted. And one of my favorite parts was the statues of the famous French women, and that those statues are going to be donated to the city of Paris. So they'll have those up, in Paris, hopefully for years and years to come, which is really cool. and I loved all of the different styles. There were so many different styles of dance, so many different styles of fashion, which is, you know, what a lot of people associate France with. And I loved the heavy metal band and Marie Antoinette and the historical links between having headless Marie Antoinette in the building that she was imprisoned in the first place was kind of a really cool nod to French history that they're not like glossing over, and they were, you know, that they were able to put that in the opening ceremonies is pretty cool. And I also just like, as a Canadian, I was just blown away by Celine Dion, and I was so happy that she was able to perform. And I think she just did a stunning job. And, you know, the Olympics is all about bringing different cultures together, and everyone in the world setting aside, you know, their differences to compete against each other in sport. And it's a lot of like togetherness, apart from the fact that you are competing against each other. There is a lot of togetherness in the Olympics. And so I think it was cool that they had, you know, Celine Dion and even Lady Gaga performing at the opening ceremonies, and also had a nod to incredible athletes of other nations like Roger Federer and Serena Williams, of course. And so that was really cool. I mean, I think they did a really great job. And like you said, like they've never had the opening ceremonies, or at least in the modern era, they've never had the opening ceremonies out of a stadium. And I think it was the first time that the opening ceremonies it's been better to be at home watching them than in the stadium, which is really cool because the vast majority of the people who watch the open ceremonies are watching from home. So we had the best seats in the house for the first time ever. Being able to see everything and see every part of the river was really cool. And I think they did an amazing job.
What do you think? How do you think the athletes felt? Like Gracie, you've obviously
Cold.
Did you get to go to the opening ceremony or the closing?
No, in Rio, the cycling was the first weekend, so we didn't do it. We did like a mini one from our hotel with some of the rowers and some of the other sports, but did the closing. But this year, there was definitely a lot of talk from the Australians, and I'm sure every country, whether or not to go because of the fact that they were on boats and couldn't like escape very quickly if they wanted to keep it a shorter day. So, you know, some athletes were looking at an 8-10 hour day, like traveling from their accommodation or the village to the event and doing the boats. And then you saw that a lot of them stayed on in the stadium for the final few performances. I think that there were a few options to leave a little bit earlier, and then there was other questions about whether there would be a toilet on the boat, and like, of course it was raining, so it was certainly less than ideal for the athletes, but they were given plenty of notice of what it would look like more or less. I'm sure that there were some questions closer to the time that they were trying to figure out, like the toilet thing, but yeah, there's a lot of athletes that do want to commit to it because their event's a bit later, and it certainly wasn't disappointing watching it, like how many athletes were on most of those boats. So I think the effect overall was good, but certainly plenty of athletes that didn't go for that reason.
Yeah, it seemed like they were quite cold by some of the social media posts, and the security risk was definitely something that a couple athletes took into mind with it being outdoors and it being so accessible. The state of the world right now was something I think some people thought about when it came to the opening ceremonies, but like I think Grace Brown went, didn't she?
No,
or
she got all dressed up though. She looked super cute, all dressed up and nowhere to go. But
it's like one of the best parts of the opening ceremonies is like, I know like Gracie and I really love the fashion of the Met Gala, even if like maybe we don't love the concept of it, but the fashion is great. And I feel like the opening ceremonies is like the Met Gala for athletes, and just seeing like some of the costumes that they have is amazing. I love it so much.
I already text you, but I really loved Belgium. I really love Belgium's kit for this Olympics.
Their opening ceremonies dress though was like so unique. Yeah. It was really cool.
But just all the kits really cool. Not to say the Aussie stuff isn't, but I actually am swaying more towards the Belgian stuff right now.
Wow, that's surprising.
Some of the smaller countries really nail it, especially if it's like they try and do a nod to their traditional dress. I'm always a bit underwhelmed with the Aussie one. Like it's pretty nice, but it's pretty hard to work with yellow and green in a formal
Yeah.
setting.
Yeah.
And they do tend to just go a bit plain, like country women's association vibes. But I still thought it was pretty nice. Quite like the skirt that Oz did this year. But yeah, some
I
countries are
like
awesome.
the patterns on the Aussie football jerseys are super cool.
Yeah.
I think that's Indigenous. Is it Indigenous art, Gracie?
Yeah, that's to acknowledge our Indigenous culture as well, which is
Ancestors.
really good.
I love the Estonian cycling kit. It's really, really cool. I mean, yeah, black and blue, two colors that are probably relatively hard to work with into a beautiful kit, but they did this really cool like crossing of like a bunch of small lines that I really, really, really like.
All right.
All right, let's talk about the time trial.
Yeah, I was gonna go into more, but no, I think people are like waiting in anticipation.
Like, just talk about the race.
God damn it.
Should we? I think we should start talking about the race by talking about the weather, because we talked briefly in the last episode about the course itself and how there were some straight sections and there were some really technical sections around the park, but that it was, for the most part, a flat, fast time trial with a little bit of technicality involved on city streets. And I don't remember if I mentioned in the podcast or in my written preview that any moisture on the road would have a massive impact on the race. And to the dismay of some and the excitement of others, it rained during the opening ceremony, so pretty much all evening the night before, and then all day the day of. And I think when it's raining before, there's a chance that the moisture, that the rain the day before will wipe away, the oil and stuff on the road. But that wasn't the case for the road race, and the roads ended up being pretty slick. So we saw some crashes. We saw some really gnarly crashes. Chloe Dygard's crash looked super gnarly. You have to hit the ground pretty freaking hard to lose your sunglasses out of a time trial helmet.
Yeah.
You got to wedge those things in there really hard. So she hit the ground pretty hard, and we saw Kopecky fall as well. So we'll talk a bit about the handling, the bike handling that came into play in the time trial. And in the end, it was Australian Grace Brown who won the time trial by over a minute over Anna Henderson of Great Britain, with Chloe Dygert coming in third. And I think, it's no secret on this podcast that we're big fans of Grace Brown
And Anna
seeing
Henderson.
her and Anna Henderson. And there was just so many storylines that happened throughout the race, and so many riders who came into this race with such high hopes and such terrible seasons leading up to this point. But for Grace Brown, she's had a dream season. She won Liège-Bastogne-Liège. She announced like a month ago that this is her final year in the sport. She was going out, with the Worlds and the Olympics in mind. And now she has a gold medal to take home with her when she goes back home at the end of the year. And it was just such an incredible performance from Grace. We know that she was riding decently well at the Giro because she was second in the time trial to Elisa Lamborghini by only 1 second. And that time trial did include a small climb. But we didn't see much of her throughout the rest of the Giro. So just incredible for her to come into this race and kind of just like mop the field with everybody. That didn't make sense.
Yeah. Where do we unpack? I think Gracie wants to say something.
Oh no, I'm happy for you to go.
I mean, it was, there's lots of things to talk about here. From the get-go in the podcast before this, like we mentioned, on paper, it wasn't a technical time trial, but because of the weather conditions, it became technical in the end. And all these riders, I mean, Kopecky is a really good bike handler. Elisa Longo Borghini herself as well. And when she heard that Kopecky had crashed, it made her really nervous going into it. And it seems that the approach was for all riders vying for a position on the podium it was all or nothing. Because there was some commentary like, or maybe Grace was just easing up more into the corners and everything. And like, I'm not a time trial specialist. I don't know a lot about the discipline. So I was trying to do a little bit of reading about it online on different forums and all that. And, obviously all the common things people know going into it is adjusting the tire pressure and all these sorts of things. Your positioning going into the corners, maybe it would be more of an aggressive position if it was a dry race, but like there's a great image of Remco, how he's sitting up much higher when he's cornering and such things like that. But I think what we have to talk about here is the fact that riders coming into this time trial who had it on their radar, like Grace, like Ellen van Dijk, Rusa before she had this horrendous year, even Anna Henderson, they've done all their work, and the team around them have calculated everything for every kind of condition there is going to be. So even though those conditions were horrible, everyone kind of knew what they were going into, and it was just going to be a case of riding that race the best you could on the day, and having like a little bit of luck too, because it was in the middle of Paris. So Gracie and I think we've all raced there during Le Course, and I did the edition where it was really wet, and okay, that was the Champs-Élysées. But even though it was pouring down with rain, it doesn't matter the amount of rain. I feel like those roads are just always going to be slick if there's just a little bit of rain. And you've got potholes and you've got corners, and there were white lines, and there was even a speed bump still in the course. So it was a really hectic course to navigate, and particularly in an Olympic race. So I imagine the pressure. I can't even imagine it, actually. So for Grace, like the performance itself just physiologically was so impressive, but we know that she can do that. I mean, last year she lost the world title only by 5 seconds to Chloe Dygert, who's a phenomenal athlete. But the handling skills and her ability to handle that internal pressure must have just been incredible, being one of the last riders to go off and know what's happened to competitors out there. I've still got goosebumps thinking about it, because it was like, I think every Australian watching was just holding their breath every corner she went through, because you could see she was on it. And going into the race, it was like everyone could feel this was her race to be won.
I think Grace's performance physically is, maybe not the most notable thing in the grand scheme, because obviously we know how strong she is. I think for her, one of the things that impressed me most is her mindset. And we know Grace is a pretty quiet person. She's very down to earth. To retire from your career when you've just won Liège-Bastogne-Liège speaks volumes of a person. And I think her mindset going into this race is what made all the difference. We know that, Ellen van Dijk, who was another rider who came into this race with a ton of expectation and a really rough season leading up to this point with a broken ankle in June only, and fighting back from that to be able to be at the race. And we know there were many riders on the start line who had really high hopes for that day. But for Grace, it seemed like she didn't let any of that pressure get to her. And her calm mindset is what got her through the course upright. Because it's not like she doesn't have the notoriety of Kopecky when it comes to handling a bike. And obviously she can handle a bike quite well. You have to be able to perform like she has in the Spring Classics even before this year. But I think that it was one of those races where everything came together for her. And that is not just form, but also how she mentally prepared for the race and how she mentally prepared on the day. Because we've talked before about how much of a difference it makes when it starts to rain, and how you react to that internally, mentally, and like how your body reacts to that. And obviously we saw that, Elise Longoborghini didn't react to the weather well mentally. If she heard Kopecky crash and immediately, kind of reined it in a little bit. And obviously she's a rider who would have gone into this race hoping for a result, but has more riding on the road race coming up. And the same with Chloe Dygert. She's a rider who has more riding on the track events coming up. or equal, I guess, because she would have really, really, really been targeting this time trial. But for Grace, it's like she had nothing to lose. This was her big goal. There is not something later on in the season that is more important to her than that day and that performance. And she was able to take that and, take some deep breaths and ride incredibly well. Just like everything was perfect.
I don't think I've got much to add to what you both have said. Just she is a really grounded, collected person, but I think she would have, still done a lot of work mentally, as much as physically, to be ready for that pressure on that day, no matter the weather, and expecting it could have been wet. But even if it wasn't, it was a technical race. It's the Olympics. Like, as much as you can tell yourself it's just another race, it's not. It's you're going to feel it on the day, and so many people are sending you good luck messages, which are of course well intended, but it all adds up to make you feel the pressure, and you don't want to let people down. But she's been really well supported by her team and by Oz Cycling, and I'd say she'd be one of the riders in that field that have spent the most time on a time trial bike, and that's been allowed by that support, and that makes a huge difference, technically as well as physically. It is super specific, even though it's still cycling. It's a different bike. She spent more time at altitude probably than ever, and just much like you said, Abby, she's got nothing to lose, so she was all in for this. And just she alluded to it in one of her post-race interviews. Just got to turn over every stone, and it sounds like she really worked as much on every facet of that kind of race that you can, and that's what pays off. And that's the tough part of time trial. You can't just be naturally good at it. You've actually got to dedicate a lot of your time to be good at it as well. And I think she was allowed to do that, which not everyone gets that opportunity. And someone I'm thinking of is Juliette Lebeau. Like, she had an amazing ride, but she probably didn't prepare as much on the time trial bike as maybe Grace or Chloe or Ellen. So, that was a ripping ride. I'm a bit disappointed for her. She didn't get a medal in her home games, but she should be really proud of that performance. And same with Anna Henderson. Maybe that all that time on the trainer did her well, to come back from a couple of tough injuries. But yeah, going back to Grace, I think she also knew that every second counts, but also a crash can lose you 30 seconds. And you have to find that balance in the corners there of taking risks, but also making sure you don't crash. So I think she was being pretty careful, but you could tell that she was quite comfortable as well. She wasn't creeping around the corners, that's for sure. Speaking of crashes, can we mention Taylor Knibb?
Oh gosh, yeah, we have to talk about this, I guess. And what USA Cycling must be thinking now. I just really feel for this athlete, because the big race for her, I mean, is the triathlon, right? And I hope that this hasn't impacted what her performance will be on Wednesday.
Yeah, I really hated seeing all of the
It was really
commentary online about how she, shouldn't have been in the race, and like, let's not cross over the sports. I don't know. It was said a lot worse than that, but I don't want to repeat it. I really hated seeing that, because obviously she's a phenom on the time trial bike, and had things gone differently, it would have been a completely different conversation we might be having at the moment, because she was putting in some really impressive times before she crashed multiple times, but it just wasn't gonna be her day with the conditions. And I think, it's just like really unfortunate, because it was USA Cycling's decision to make the criteria for their spot allotment who was going to represent the US in the race. They did that to themselves, and why would you not say yes to an opportunity like that if you've secured the spot? So I don't blame her at all for being in the race, and I just hated seeing so much negativity towards her, because direct your negativity towards USA Cycling. But I also think that this race had there been another rider from the US in this race, there is not a rider currently that I can think of who would have excelled on a course like this under these conditions, who races for the US. Maybe Ruth Edwards, but she wouldn't have been able to qualify because she didn't race in 2023. So I just was like really disappointed in cycling fans for their reaction to Taylor Knibb. And I just feel so sorry for her because, like, not only did she crash multiple times, which is going to affect the body no matter how hard you go down, it is really, it hurts the next day. Like, your body aches the next day if you're going that fast and you hit the ground. And like that coupled with the like humiliation of going down in a race like this when you know there was backlash already to you getting the spot is just horrible. And I feel so bad for her. And I just...
Yeah.
No, it's awful. Have empathy, honestly.
Yeah, definitely felt for her. It, like, some of the world's best riders were slipping out on those corners. So like Kopecky crashed, and she is a great bike handler. It was just like, a really brutal day for so many riders. I also felt for her mechanic who had a little crash as well.
Yeah.
That would have also been quite mortifying.
That could have happened to anyone, honestly. Running on those roads. It was just pretty horrendous to watch that. And particularly, again, going back, this is the Olympic Games. The world is watching too. You know, people who maybe don't follow cycling are tuning in. A podcast I won't mention, I briefly listened to, or was starting to listen to, and just kind of turned it off because I was like, no, don't want to hear this commentary about it. But again, the biggest thing for me was I'm just really sad for that athlete because she's got her main event is still coming up, and I really hope that she pulls up on Wednesday and is able to perform at the very best of her ability on that day.
And is also able to not get like Giardia.
Yeah. And let's talk about the emotions. Loren, I don't know about you, but Kimberly and I were crying at the end.
Yeah, it was my son's 3rd birthday party, and so I had my hands full. I had people over, but I was managing to run in and out because my father-in-law, he prefers to actually sit with the kids or with the quiet, which is nice. So he was inside watching the race and keeping me in the loop with what was happening. And it was just like I said to him, this is for Grace today. And he's like, oh, I don't know. I think Kopecky, because he's Belgian. But then, of course, Kopecky crashed. And he was like, okay, maybe it is for Grace today. I don't know. I know Grace not as well as Gracie. And I think just people I know who don't even know Grace personally, who are Australians, were just so emotional over this win. And yeah, I don't know. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. I don't know what it is.
It's a bit of the hero's journey, isn't it? We all love a good sporting story, and if we know the person and we followed their journey and you really want them to do well and they finally get that fairy tale, I think it's hard not to pull at the heartstrings a little bit, to be like just so happy for someone, but like kind of see that story unfold and just to see their emotions in real time.
I think the element as well is, and you can totally relate to this, Gracie, is being Australian and having to sacrifice so much, because if you want to be a pro cyclist, the racing circuit is in Europe. So you have to leave your life behind. And for some of the younger riders, of course, like if you're going over when you're 19, 20, 21, I went over when I was 22. I was just starting with life. But for athletes as well, who come into it a little bit later and really had a life before. I mean, my whole life revolved around cycling, but Grace is just one of those athletes as well who had to leave her husband behind every year, months and months at a time, not seeing him. And all of this in pursuit of this goal, because I think in Tokyo, she really believed in herself after her performance there, that it was possible. And, there's not many athletes who can really say that I want to try and win an Olympic gold, and it's actually a reality, that dream, and to work so hard towards that and win silver at the World Championships in Australia. And I remember standing there with Gracie watching that. She was in the hot seat for the longest time, waiting for Ellen van Dijk, who was going to be the one to beat. She gets silver, which was an amazing result. And then last year, again, thinking maybe Grace was going to pull it off, and then Dygert beat her by only like 5 seconds. And then this year, this incredible season that she's had, it was just like all leading up to this moment. And then I think what made it more emotional is the fact, she announced that she was retiring. And that video of her was so emotional, and she had to really hold back a lot. So I think all those sort of things building up to this moment it was just really beautiful to see. And I think it was just a very special moment. And there's so many of those moments in the Olympics. If we think of like Simone Biles and her incredible performance in gymnastics, and there's just so many stories. And I think we need to talk about Ellen van Dijk, because I'm just so sad for her.
Yeah, if there was another rider who kind of came into this race with the same, expectation after disappointment in former Olympics, because Ellen wasn't selected for Tokyo, and obviously like they won the gold medal there with Annemiek van Vleuten. So it was a tough period for her to kind of prove her worth for selection for the Dutch team. And then she went on that year to win the World Championship time trial. But coming into this games, having a baby last year, she's 10 months postpartum now as the race is happening, or as the Olympics is going on. But to come back into the season so strong after working her entire pregnancy for this one day, this one effort, this one 40-minute effort, or less than 40-minute effort. And then to break your ankle in training like a little over a month before the race. She never gave up on the goal of winning gold in Paris. And we already knew that she could work through an injury or a bodily adjustment because of her work during pregnancy, and she did. And the Dutch national team did testing with her and with Rihanna Marcus to see who could put out the better numbers leading up to the race, because Rihanna Marcus, being the Dutch TT champ, would be the obvious choice for them to put in the race instead of Ellen, if Ellen couldn't have proved that she'd kept her fitness throughout the injury. And Ellen put out better numbers, so she was cleared by the Dutch Federation to race. And I don't know if that was the best call from the Dutch Federation. They've been known to clear athletes during injury to compete for them when they potentially shouldn't have. Annemiek van Vleuten comes to mind with, two times she came into the race with a broken bone, and one of them being Australia, which obviously she won. But I do feel there were people that I know who were riding the course the day before and saw Ellen out riding, and she still had a boot on her foot the day before the race. And so I just don't know if it was a great call having her in the race. And then obviously for Ellen, having had this injury and being a mom when the conditions are like this, there is a portion of you that is a little more cautionary. Obviously that doesn't apply to everyone, but Ellen said after the race that she was very nervous, and that it was not the best conditions for her. And we know that she's not the best bike handler in the peloton. She famously absolutely despises Paris-Roubaix for that reason. And I just think, it was just not meant to be her day. She didn't have a great day. She finished 11th, almost 3 minutes down on Grace. And if she had won, it would have been one of the best stories in cycling.
Yeah.
And would have just been such an incredible victory. I was ready to write. I was set to write the story through streaming tears, because I just love Ellen as a person and as a bike racer. But many things added up to just be against her on the day, and it didn't go the way she wanted.
I feel like Ellen and Grace are two sides of the same coin. It's the Olympics, and some people realize their dream and others don't. And, Ellen's been world champion in the time trial, she's won so many races. She's a legend in cycling, and she didn't get to crack that Olympic medal, and and I know that's going to sit with her for the rest of her life as this feeling of disappointment or failure or whatever, and it's such a shame. And no one can take that feeling away from her. That just is what it is. But I hope she can know, and I hope she listens to this sometimes, that she is still so loved and so admired. And I admired her a long time ago. And at Rio, she had a disruption in her race. She rode off the course, and it was just a bit of a disaster race. But she got back on and she finished. And I remember seeing her in the dining hall, and she looked so sad, like a couple of days after. And I didn't know her, but I went up to say that, I still really thought a lot of her, especially her sportsmanship to finish the race, and that I thought she was just awesome anyway. And she wasn't in a great headspace to take it. Like, she was, smiled and said thanks, but I don't think she was, I think she was a bit too down to take anything like that. But I'm sure she's feeling pretty down again at the moment. And like Abby said, maybe she shouldn't have raced this time around, but this is such a huge dream for people like us and her. And but like, why wouldn't you race, even though the odds are stacked against you? And like, that's the athlete mentality, is to try anyway. And she tried and it didn't work out, but it doesn't mean that she's, not one of the legends of the sport. And that's just, part of the Olympics. There's a lot of people that deserve to go that don't even get to go to the Olympics. And then there's a lot of people that could win a medal, but it's just not their year. Like, they have a great year the year before, or they have a crash or something goes wrong. So it's just like this brutal thing as well to deal with, no matter who you are, whether you got to go or not. It's not many people get the Grace Brown day.
No. I think on the flip side of that coin is, if Ellen hadn't gone, that question mark would have hung over her entire life as well. What would have been if she had gone? So either way, it is what it is now. But like Gracie said, it is something that there are so many athletes who will have to move on with life. And realize you didn't realize the Olympic dream of winning gold. But the percentage of people who actually do get to realize that dream is just so incredibly small. You could be having the season of your life and be the favorite to win the Olympics, and it just doesn't happen on the day. So
you can't fault her for going to the race when she was cleared to go, because it was 8 years in the making. More than that, but just in the, the lens of when she kind of became or started to become the rider that we know now. It's an 8 years in the making dream that she could finish on that top step. And even going through everything that she went through in the last year, having a baby and coming back from the broken ankle, it would have been, even more important for her to prove herself on the day that she deserved that spot and that she could fight through these things. And I don't blame her at all for starting. Like, I don't mean for it to sound like that. I think, I do feel for Rihanna Marcus a bit, because she's had such a strong couple seasons, but I think she's also a rider who could target LA. Whereas Ellen, I'm not sure if she'll still be in the sport in 4 years, maybe, but it's definitely a little bit more, it's definitely farther away for her than it would be for like Rihanna Marcus, for example.
Rihanna Marcus, I guess, can still, she's a bit younger, look towards, if she stays in the sport for another 4 years, look towards Los Angeles. But I guess for Ellen will be turning 41 that year. And it's definitely not out, like, she can do it if she wants to stay in the sport, for sure. Because if we look at Kristen Armstrong, she did it 3 times. And I think the last time when she won gold, she was 42 or 3.
I think she turned 42 like the next day or something like that.
And she was someone who would step away from the sport and come back just for the game. So, but I really think, now, and she has kids as well. But I don't want to compare the two athletes. But I do think for Ellen, this was like the last game she had in mind. But knowing Ellen as well, I do wonder if she thinks no, I'm going to have one more crack. Like, it might hit her in a year or something, but if she can maintain the sort of level that she's at, you can train just specifically for a time trial and make that just purely your discipline and just make the selection criteria. Who knows? That said, I don't know how the Dutch would feel about that. The USA is very different in their way of selecting
They
athletes.
love a time trialist.
I was thinking of
They
that
love
too.
a
I
time
don't know.
trialist, the US.
So
know
she
if
might
that
have
you
to
could get
change
away with that.
citizenship.
Yeah. Can we have a little chat about Anna Henderson and how nice it is when someone gets silver and they're stoked?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, she was so excited, and just like, what an incredible result for Anna Henderson. She is like brand new to the sport. She came in from ski racing. She had a hell of a year, 2 broken collarbones leading up to this point. Her last race was the national championships, which she won the time trial and finished second in the road race. And so it was pretty unclear what her form was coming into this race. Like, we knew she was strong because she is, but it's just so many setbacks that she had to deal with. But she had to come in and get second in the Olympics, which I don't think is a result that many people expected. Is just such an incredible achievement. And she was so happy. Like, it was amazing to see her and Grace sitting together after the race, just both of them absolutely stoked about, about what they'd just done.
Do you know really what cool. It reminds me of a little bit? Not to the same degree, but Gracie, do you remember when Sally Pearson won silver in Beijing in the hurdles? And it was like she won gold. I mean, it was on another level, but she just couldn't believe it. And it was like she went on to win gold in future Olympics, but it was that sort of feeling that came back to me, is that, and also offline, what Gracie was saying about sometimes when you go into such a competition like the Olympics with, less expectation on yourself, you're going to go out there and have a crack and do your very best on the day. That's what everyone's trying to do. But was Anna one of the riders we were talking about in the preview? We knew she was good. We know she's fantastic. But based on the year that she's had, it was very much a question mark. So she wasn't really so much in the discussion. So I guess that sometimes plays into, like, think of Juliette Lebeau as well, an amazing ride. All the riders who had a lot of pressure on them, I'm sure that sort of impacted in a way how they performed on the day, just based on the conditions.
I mean, Kim Kadzo as well, like, what a result for her. 7th in the Olympic time trial in those conditions, being so new to the sport was just incredible. Like, really, really, really cool. And she had her whole family there, which is just, the feel good stuff that you love to see. But for Anna, yeah, I mean, she was a rider who I think really benefited from Chloe Dygart's crash. Chloe finished so close to her that for a second it looked like Chloe had got the silver, but one second below for Anna to take silver. And for Chloe, that would be, like, for Anna, getting silver is basically winning. For Chloe, getting third is a loss, because she would have come into this race having barely done any racing this season, purely to be ready for the games. Crashing in the time trial, which is, a week before the event that you have been preparing for, the team pursuit, and the track that she's, hoping to get gold there. And to crash so hard, I mean, the images of her after the race were hard to watch. And definitely, but she's a rider who we know doesn't hold back at all. And in these conditions, that's just not something that you can do and remain upright. So the place where she crashed was you were going from tarmac to cobbles. It was a section where you really needed to rein it in well before the turn. Like, you can't slow down when you get into a corner.
You can't break through the corner in the rain.
You can't break through the corner. You need to slow down in the build up to the corner. And she's just not a rider who's going to slow down at any point. And that kind of, bit her in the butt in this situation. But one thing you can say about Chloe's crash and her ride is that even if she hadn't crashed, she couldn't have beaten Grace.
No, that was I was going to say as well. That margin that Grace won by was
too big.
Really a big stamp on the competition of, like, she won that fair and square regardless of crashes. That was a really big big margin.
Yeah, Chloe can maybe say like she could have gotten silver had she not crashed, but she absolutely still wouldn't have won the race.
No, not on the day. Can we briefly talk about the mountain bike just briefly?
Yeah, we can wrap up the time trial. I mean, it was like, yeah, we pretty much talked about everything we were talking about. Julia Labuse, amazing ride. Kopecky, probably a little bit disappointed with the form that she has coming in, but yeah, she crashed as well, and that was the more surprising crash than the two Americans, obviously. And there were more riders that crashed that we didn't even see. The coverage was pretty abysmal in terms of actually showing riders out on course. Like, we never saw Kim Kadzo, I think, once her entire race until she came across the finish line and went straight into the hot seat. There was very little pictures of Grace Brown on course as well. I was like pretty disappointed in the coverage, to be honest. I feel like we didn't get the pictures that the riders deserved. But yeah, the amount of riders that came across the line with blood or torn lycra meant there was a lot more crashes we didn't see. So definitely a hectic day out there, but amazing Grace. I'm so proud of you. We talk about, realizing a dream and so many things that happened before realizing that dream, and the years and years of disappointment and preparation that go into an Olympic event. And for Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, racing the Olympic Games on home soil, having had the absolutely heartbreaking situation from Rio, and then last year as well, or last Olympics as well in Tokyo, and coming into this event, the absolute favorite, having had the season that she's had and the dominant performances that we know she can put in. She's done it at the World Championships multiple times, and she just was on another level.
She did make it look easy, but she was so focused as well.
I think
like
that's
she didn't even like make eye contact with the crowd the whole time.
No. And like the audience, I swear, like 95%, it felt like were French. Like, imagine that. Home games, that crowd screaming in your face, like, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. But she was just so super focused. My favorite moment was the medal ceremony when the Olympic gold medalist from Rio, Jenny Rissveds, who has had an incredible journey to this bronze medal. If you don't know her, look her up, an amazing Swedish rider, was hugging her as she was crying on the podium. Like, just, and because Jenny understands it too, but just realizing that dream as well and everything that she's been through to get there. I thought that was just really beautiful moment.
And on home soil, like, how often do you get to race the Olympics on home soil, let alone win a gold medal on home soil? It's like everything that Pauline has been through in trying to achieve an Olympic gold medal up to this point, it was like it was all building up for this to be the Olympics that she won. And it was just so amazing. I mean, she said in her post-race interview that it wasn't this race, it was every single race leading up to this point, where every race was about this day. Like, the wins that she had up to this point were just, icing on the cake of winning an Olympic gold, which was the only thing that she has wanted for years and years and years. And to do it in front of a home crowd with, you listen to your national anthem playing. Zach Williams, the photographer, said that listening to like 15,000 people sing the French national anthem it hits different. And like, it was just such an incredible race. And for, like Loren said, Pauline winning was one amazing story, years in the making, but Jenny getting third was another. And she, won the gold in Rio, had to step away from the sport after that, and then now has come back to win bronze. And Haley Batten as well.
What a story as well.
Was ninth in Tokyo and is so young. She's 25. She's basically a kid. And that she, came back from a puncture to join that group and fought tooth and nail to get into that spot to get second. Got a little lucky that Puck flatted because Puck was really looking like she was a shoo-in to get that silver. But just an incredible story. And then even if you look off the podium, Evie Richards 7 weeks ago had a debilitating concussion, was in bed 7 weeks ago, couldn't get out of bed. And to come back and finish 5th in the Olympics is massive. She was like she won. The way her post-race interview was amazing. I mean, it was just such an incredible day for so many people. And the only person that was maybe disappointed in the top 5 was Puck, because she was having such an amazing ride up to that point. But yeah, the race was so good. It was such a good race. It was really, really.
And don't you just love, I just love mountain biking, but the camaraderie, like I just love that everyone, and Gracie, you've been a mountain biker, so you can probably speak to this more than me, but I love watching it. Like everyone hug each other, and everyone who's on that circuit knows each other so well. That's just a beautiful thing to watch as a spectator, because they're all in it together. They're all genuinely happy for each other. But I think for Pauline, she's been, like I was saying, so hyper-focused this year that at all the World Cups and everything, you don't see that emotion from her. So it was really nice to see her finally like run over to the girls and hug them and get amongst it, because it's like this just wave of relief, I imagine, just washed over her. And she's like, oh, I've fucking done it. Finally. Okay. Box ticked.
Yeah.
Let it out.
No, I agree. That was like one of the nicest parts of the coverage, was seeing the hugs, that first hug between Jenny and Hayley. They were just, Hayley was just over the moon with silver, and Jenny looked really like content, like there was a bit of closure or something in her face, and really proud of herself for bronze. And then Pauline, all that emotion. But yeah, you do see it at the World Cups as well, that hugging and happiness and friendship. And it's strange because it's such a serious sport, and it's not exactly a cool sport. It's certainly cooler than road racing, but it's not like downhilling or whatever. But I don't know, I think maybe because it's an individual sport that it opens the door for friendships, because they're not like little tribes like we are in road cycling. We're not closed, like we're probably closed off because we're in teams. Like for sure there's friendships that span across teams in road racing, but it's a whole different thing when you see that friendship in the cross country, and especially at the Olympics, they're just all so happy for each other. It's really sweet. I think like that's such a great show of Olympic spirit, of sportsmanship. So yeah, great race. And yeah, it a lot like World Cups and Worlds we've seen in the past, where Pauline or Liana just ride away from everyone. The race for first is over, but it was still a great race for second. And again, I feel bad for Puck. She did great. I think she probably put herself in the red, so she was going to have her work cut out for her to get a medal. But you don't want people to leave with the flat. That kind of sucks. And she's so young, like she's going to be really disappointed and feel like it's, the end of the world, but she's got so much ahead of her. She'll get a medal eventually.
Well, I mean, if she looks at Pauline, it took 4 goes. So,
yeah,
I think for the young athletes, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in perseverance. And also the fact that sometimes, realizing the Olympic dream as well is maybe not going to be a reality. But it all goes back to who that team is around you and having the necessary support. Because on the other side of it, like I was saying with Jenny, I mean, she was quite young as well when she won gold in Rio. She was born in 94, 22. Is very young to win an Olympic gold medal. And she didn't handle it very well. So you've got the different sides of it, the dealing with the disappointment, but then also the overwhelming feelings and emotions that must come with either winning a medal or winning gold. I can't imagine what that must feel like for a young person or a person in general.
As it pertains to us, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot has just won a gold medal. She's obviously still got probably goals this year with the World Championships in Andorra, which I will be on the ground watching. And then she's going to hang up her mountain bike and come back to road. And she's already said in her post-race interview that her goal is winning the Tour de France Femme. So 2025 Tour de France Femme, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot against Annemiek van Vleuten, against the new crop.
Anna van der Breggen.
Anna van der Breggen. Sorry.
If Annemiek came back, Jesus, imagine.
No, she's happy. She's so stoked. She's there. She's on the ground at the Olympics, pre-riding the courses, hugging people. It's great. Anna van der Breggen and Pauline Ferrand-Prévot going for that yellow jersey. It's going to be, I mean, blast from the past, but also, yeah, really exciting. Let's talk about the road race. Sunday, August 4th, the estimated finish time is 6:45 local time. So that's 6:45 in Paris. If you're in Australia, in Melbourne, that's 2:45 a.m. RIP. And it's going to be quite the race. The course is very hilly-ish. It's very similar to Glasgow in that it's kind of like a classics course. A lot of small climbs. The first climb is 14K in 1.9 kilometers long at 6%. And then there are just many climbs like that until they get to Paris. And then they do 3 circuits in Paris that include one climb that's 1 kilometer long at 6.5%. And then in between doing that climb 3 times, there are also multiple little poppy climbs as well. And as it's a city circuit, it's going to be very technical. The descent off of the categorized climb on the circuit is really tricky into like a very sharp corner. That climb is also really, really narrow and cobbled. So very classics-esque. It's been compared to a slightly less challenging version of Glasgow. So I think it's going to be a really, really exciting race. It's definitely nothing like we saw in Rio or Tokyo, which was just a straightforward road race, point A to point B. This is starting in Paris, ending in Paris with a circuit. So it's going to be really, really exciting. And I think we're looking at classic style riders to win something like this, with obviously Lotte Kopecky being at the top of that list, the form that she has displayed all season long. But at the Giro specifically, I think she's kind of the out and out favorite, but it also depends how the race is raced, because the Dutch are obviously coming in with a really strong team. They have 3 potential favorites based on how the race is raced. Demi Vollering, who was 5th in the time trial and is obviously targeting the Tour de France Femme, but this will be a huge goal for her as well. Marianne Vos, who won the gold medal in London in 2012. She's back for her 5th Olympics and stronger than ever. And then Lorena Wiebes, if it comes down to any kind of reduced bunch, she's obviously like the out and out favorite to win. And she is riding so well at the moment that it's hard to say whether those climbs will even impact her. But you also have, the Italian team. They're coming in with Elise Longoborghini, who just won the Giro and has finished 3rd in the last 2 Olympic road races in Rio and in Tokyo. She's one who I cried during Pauline's win. You think I'm going to be able to hold myself together if Elise Longoborghini wins this bike race? Like, no,
not a chance.
And then, well, maybe because maybe she'll crack some emotion if she wins.
Yeah.
That's not something we see very often. And then you have, a whole handful of outside favorites, and this race can go really any which way. It's such a lottery how the race is going to go, and with the small team sizes, maximum 4, but most of the favorites are coming in with 3, and so you're looking at a very different race than a standard bike race. We've got the Australian team is coming in. Grace is obviously on great form, and Loretta Hansen is going to be racing for them, and with the race being so different, she's probably in support, but you never know how things will go. Ruby Roseman Gannon, obviously, this will be a huge goal for her as well. You've got the British team coming in with Anna fresh off a silver medal. Lizzie Deignan, probably her last Olympics, so going to be a big goal for her as well. I mean, so many things could happen. Kasia Niewiadoma, this and the Tour are her 2 biggest goals of the year, and obviously Worlds. And I think for her, she's been out of the peloton for a really long time. She raced Tour de Suisse and she raced Thuringen, but she's taken a big step away from racing to train specifically for this and for the Tour. So she's an outside favorite because we don't know her form, but knowing Kasia, she's going to absolutely love a course like this. Alison Jackson is another one who's coming in, purely for this race. Yeah, there's so much. There's so much that could happen, and there's so many riders to be excited about, and can't wait.
I think this is always a really hard race to preview and talk about, because obviously, like we've said before, The tactics are different. There's no, I think a key point here, no race radios. I think it's not going to play out like it did in Tokyo, where people were confused about who was still up the road. You would hope that wouldn't happen here. But with the team sizes and everything, this is a race where, yes, the favorite could win, like Voss in 2012, for example. She was the favorite to win. But it can also be a case of, yeah, a break going up the road with a selection of the right riders. And then if you are in a team, like Cassie, I think, how many teammates does she have? 2. There's 2 of them in total. 3 of them. Well, in a nation, the US only have 2, for example, I think, right?
The U.S. only have 2. Yeah, they have Chloe Dygert and they have Kristen Faulkner. I actually am curious if Chloe will start because of her crash and watching how they had to help her off the bike after the race. So with the track events in mind that are on the 5th, I believe, is the team pursuit, I don't know if she'll race, but maybe she'll start and see how it feels. But yeah, like the team sizes make it really interesting because should a break go, there's no one to chase. There's very few people to chase. Only like the Italians and the Dutch really have a domestique-ish rider. And I guess Australia with Loretta. The Dutch have Ellen van Dijk and the Italians have Elena Cecchini. So there are teams that have someone who could chase, but it's will they work together because one person can't do all the chasing if a group gets any distance. So I think based on what happened at Tokyo, they're going to be very, very hesitant to let anyone get up the road. But the way that the final circuits are, it's going to be so hard to pull anything back.
And it's a long race. It's 158 kilometers. So you can't control 158 kilometers with such a small team. So it's a little bit of gambling, in my opinion. And if we look at how Athens was won with Sarah Carrigan, she wasn't the favorite for that. It was Anna Wilson. She just happened to be in the right position. And then, Judith Arndt, she is actually a pretty good sprinter, Sarah. And that's quite there's a backstory to that as well. I think she flipped them off at the finish line, Judith, because they didn't select, who was it? The other sprinter from Germany. Anyway, I digress. I just think it's a hard race to predict. And I don't know as a director how you go into this race, actually. And Gracie, you've been there in the room when you've had to discuss race tactics back when Australia had 4 riders to go into the race. But obviously Rio was something different because it was a matter of getting your top rider, I guess, to the bottom of that climb and going, let's see if you've got the legs on the day. And if you have the legs, you've got the legs and you can go with the best climbers. And if you don't, well, so be it. Whereas this is a bit more open, I feel. And a rider like Loretta, if we just think of Australia, who's had an incredible year, is still sometimes underrated if she gets in the right move. And like you said, Abby particularly wants to hit those finishing circuits. If the group in front has a big enough gap in the right composition, even if it's not 100% the right composition, it's very hard to bring it back. Because we saw in London when they had that break of 4 riders with Shelley Olds, Mariana Voss, who else was in it? Lizzie Deignan and the Russian rider.
Olga Zabelinskaya.
Yeah, there were key riders behind who had missed it and were chasing as hard as they can. It was impossible to bring them back. So
I would back Loretta in a break, that's for sure. No, you're right, Loren. I think this is a trickier race, I think, tactically than Rio, for example. I got into that. I was in the break in Rio, but I wasn't going to win that race from the break anyway. As soon as we hit the bottom of that climb, I went backwards. But I think it's going to be very interesting, and I'd say the Dutch might want to be more controlling than they've been in the past because it is riskier. I think that they're going to be, a bit more policing at the front, but it's tough because they've got
different
potentially
cards
3 winners. Yeah, so I don't know. It's going to be an exciting race. Like, I know that's a basic thing to say, but like I'm really looking forward to watching this race, and also like the location of it. I think it's going to be cool.
I think this course, more than Rio and Tokyo, really promises a fantastic race no matter what happens. Because the last two Olympics have been really highlighting a big climb near the end. And both races were really exciting for their own reasons. But this is a race that is very...
It's more open.
Similar to races that the riders do all the time. And the riders don't do a one day with one big climb in it very often. So this is something that they'll be more familiar with. And I think like Loren said, more open. There's more opportunities for more riders to actually do something on this course. Whereas like Rio, almost came down to the two best climbers in the world. And Tokyo was a total mess for a lot of people. So really, really, really looking forward to this one.
Are we going to pick? We're going to pick
I reckon we'll see a lot of trek bikes if there's a breakaway.
Yes.
I mean, you can see them from
and
a mile away,
future
so
trek
beautiful.
bikes. I think future trek bikes.
Yeah. I don't want to pick.
Nah.
I want to go in with no.
I want a green and gold again. Green and gold again. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, Grace could definitely get the double. That would be pretty cool. But like, I don't know. I think the Aussies are in for a good shot to get a medal.
Yeah.
I reckon Lizzie
so
Diagnon's actually like the non-dark horse for me.
Do you remember she was we had to make a prediction in 2024 and I said she was going to win Olympic gold as my bold prediction?
Yeah.
12 years on from London.
2 babies later.
Hey, think of the way she raced Worlds last year. I mean, that was, she knows how to deliver on the day in those really, really big competitions. Kind of like Tiff Cromwell, actually. Whenever Tiff would show up to a championship event, she was always on it. And there's some riders who are just on it on championship events.
You could just see Lizzie like staying real quiet in the Giro and just using it as training.
Yeah.
I think some riders are really going to surprise us. That's for sure.
And I'll be on the ground cheering. So look out for my giant Australian flag.
Who?
Oh, you can bring us a vibes report. Can't wait.
Well, there's going to be I saw Georgie Howe. She's going to be there on the ground. She's there in Paris watching some of her fellow former rowers because she was a rower, and she'll be there on the road race course. So I think there'll be a few people that come out for it.
Should we wrap it up?
Yep.
Do we want to do obsessions today, or should we just say we're obsessed with the Olympics and have that be it?
I think that's my obsession right now.
I think I watched 5 sports on replay today.
Have you watched women's rugby yet? Because that's my new obsession.
Yeah, I watched the women's sevens. That was great. I watched about 3 hours of equestrian because that's my jam.
Equestrian?
I watched it. Yeah, I love watching the horses. But I'm a horse girl.
I did not know this.
And what else did I watch? The gymnastics, the mountain biking. I watched some of the American basketball because that's pretty sick. I'll watch anything. I love it.
I'm unobsessed with the Canadian football team. Pretty disappointed in everything that's gone on over there. Love the team, the athletes themselves, but
yeah, I read something briefly. What was that? Do they have like drones spying on other teams or something?
The New Zealand team noticed a drone flying over their practice before the game, their game. And then they traced it back to one of the assistant coaches in Canada, and him and his assistant or something were sent home. And then and also had I think maybe a massive fine from the French police because you can't fly a drone in a city. And then as they were doing more investigation into it, FIFA and the IOC, they found that this has been going on for years from Canadian soccer, both men's and women's. The men's team have been shown the footage in training of other teams, but a statement from the women said that the athletes had no idea, which we don't know if that's true or not. And then the head coach for Canada was originally just suspended from the game against New Zealand, but now, since more things have come to light, she was sent home and she's suspended from coaching soccer for the next year. And then the Canadian team was deducted deducted 6 points in the overall ranking. So they're basically guaranteed to not make it out of the rounds now. They won yesterday against France. So now they're at 0 points. Before they were -3. But yeah, it's not a good look for Canadian football.
No, that's pretty silly.
Jesus.
Yeah, very, very, very disappointing from, people who are known to be nice.
Oh.
But they won gold last time. So you're going in with pressure. But still, it's just really, really, really disappointing. I'm anti-obsessed with it. Obsessed with it, but like not in a good way. Lila even had we're in Girona right now before we go to Paris, and I even brought Lila her little Canadian soccer jersey to wear during the days that they have matches.
Uh-oh.
She's not wearing it. No, I'm not. I'm pretty upset. Well, we got so much to look forward to. We've got the track and field events start on the 1st. Those are my favorite events. We've got, rugby sevens, just so many cool things to watch. Tom's is going to go watch the beach volleyball purely because of where the stadium is, right in front of the Eiffel Tower. Very,
Amazing.
very cool things to come. And we'll be back next week to talk about what we hope is a really, really good road race.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening.